Next, I'd like to introduce you to Jason Higa. Jason is the CEO of FCH Enterprises, which includes Zippy's Restaurants. Jason practiced law in Honolulu for several years before returning to the family business, where he worked in different positions before ending up as the CEO. As you may be aware, Zippy's suffered a data breach, and Jason is here to tell you about it. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Higa.
Thank you for inviting me to participate in this year's conference. In late 2017, Zippy's Restaurants suffered a payment card data breach. What I would say is that during our 52 years of business, there has been just a small handful of events that really rocked off our foundation, and this data breach incident about 18 months ago was certainly one of these events. As businesses, we build relationships with our customers, and this relationship, as all of you know, is based upon trust. Our data breach incident eroded this trust of our customers, at least in the short term, and that was probably one of the biggest long-term concerns that we had. Since our data breach incident, we have been sharing our experiences with the hope that other Hawaii companies may avoid a similar fate. So I want to start off with just a brief history of Zippy's Restaurants. So we first opened on October 17, 1966 by brothers Francis and Charlie Higa. Our first location was on Oahu in a neighborhood of McCully on South King Street. And that's a picture from about 1970. Today, we have 24 Zippy's locations, 22 on Oahu. Kahului here opened in 2008, and Hilo opened in 2013, and we have plans for expansion into the Las Vegas market next year. Included in your bags were a 50th anniversary magazine insert, which was part of Honolulu Magazine 2 years ago. And if you have a chance, I hope that you might find some of the history to be interesting. Now, I want to talk about our data breach, and I want to start with the timeline, and I'll go into further details on the timeline as I go through my presentation. So it all started on October 10, 2017, when the malicious malware was first downloaded. It was done through a phishing attack, basically an email that was sent with a Word attachment, and the Word attachment containing the malware. It took 6 weeks, but the malware migrated from our email server system to our POS or point of sale register systems, and this is where payment card transactions are processed. By December 19, 2017 to March 29, 2018, payment card data was captured, extracted by the malware. On April 6, our forensic investigator was engaged, and it took 18 days before we were able to verify what was going on, and in fact, it was confirmed that payment card data was the subject of the data breach. We shortly were able to secure our IT systems, and on April 27, public notification of the data breach was made. So lessons learned. There's really 3 lessons I wanted to share. First is that IT systems, from what we learned, are inherently vulnerable. I think Will spoke about that earlier. While Zippy's suffered a data breach involving payment card information, I believe that our story really speaks to the vulnerability of all IT systems. Second, cyber criminals operate as sophisticated businesses, and I will share what we learned about an organization called Fin7. And finally, I hope to share what you can do today to mitigate potential problems tomorrow. So recent point of sale or POS data breaches include a large number of retailers. And the reason is very simple. The point of sale systems, no matter which brand, they're all inherently vulnerable. So there's much discussion about encryption, and indeed, all of the POS systems do encrypt the payment card data. But there is a moment in time that the payment card data resides in an unencrypted form. And it's just by definition, the payment cannot be processed unless the data is in an unencrypted form. And it is this precise moment in time that the cyber criminals access the payment card data. You're talking about microseconds or fractions of seconds during the processing, and that's when they acquire the data. So the vulnerability of point-of-sale systems, I bring up as just one example. Will spoke about WordPress, but there's many, many examples of IT systems that are simply vulnerable to cyber criminals. So let me talk about Fin7. So Fin7 is an international group, and what I should say is that Fin7 is a name assigned to a group that I think law enforcement knows less about, but knows enough about to put together a profile. And this is essentially the profile that has been put together over years. The great suspicion is that they are working out of Eastern Europe. Ukraine it has been identified as one of the main areas, and Fin7 has been well documented to have been responsible for cyber attacks in the US, UK, Australia, and France. They've been credited with attacks upon 100 financial institutions in 30 countries, estimated 1 billion in extraction. One small example that you may have read or heard about are ATM machines. And through their malware, they were able to extract pretty much all of the monies from the machines. And how they found out about it was by viewing video after discovering the empty ATM machine and seeing an individual totally clothed late at night, carrying a duffel bag to the ATM machine, waiting for the designated time and collecting all of the cash that was dispensed from the ATM machine. But that's just one example of many malware breaches that occurred within the banking community. And what's interesting is that many of those breaches were underreported or unreported. And I think it took the financial institutions some time to figure out that they needed to start to share what was going on within the industry. And only then, I believe, that the financial industry started to catch up with the Fin7 Group. And what happened is, as the Fin7 Group started to be counteracted by the financial institution, Fin7 migrated from the financial institutions to really the point of sale, credit, debit card data systems. So there's a report issued fairly recently, August of 2018, regarding Fin7 and the point of sale data breaches, which had been identified in 47 states and the District of Columbia. And the numbers are really staggering. 15 million card numbers from 6,500 point-of-sale terminals, impacting 3,600 retailers and restaurants. And really, when you look at these numbers, what you understand and what the law enforcement has really concluded is that Fin7 really is run like a business, a very large business, where employees, if you will, have weekends and holidays off. They take vacations. But much of their infrastructure is very professionally run. At the end of the day, their earnings are estimated to be $50 million per month, and much of those monies are reinvested into their research and development because they're always staying one step ahead of the antivirus softwares, for example. They're always one step ahead. What I will say about the FBI report in 2018 is that today it's incorrect because it's not 47 states, it's actually 48 states because Hawaii was one of the 3 states that wasn't included among that number. And so what I'm really talking about is that in our case, our data breach was in fact traced to Fin7. And when we first learned about our data breach, one of the things we were told by the forensic investigators is don't even think that we're going to figure out who did this because that never happens. And it just happened that certain circumstances fell into place. There was an arrest of 2 Fin7 individuals, and the evidence in that case helped the FBI to trace or connect our data breach to that organization. So I want to talk real briefly about the monetization of card data. How do you generate $50 million a month? And as Will talked about, there's a dark web, and Joker Stash is an example of one of the websites where you can go to and purchase card data information. And really what's happening is that individual cards may be valued anywhere from $12 to $70, but the card data is being sold in batches of 1,000 or more. So you can imagine transactions of 10,000 cards at $50 on average. It's a large dollar amount that is being transacted. And these websites basically provide great customer service, offering bulk discounts, frequent buyer discounts, money-back guarantees. And the purchasers of this card data are the ones that are executing the fraud using that information to monetize. So I want to talk about social engineering. As I mentioned earlier, the data breach started with a malware that was downloaded on October 10. It was a Tuesday, and at 6 a.m., we basically received simultaneous calls at least 10 Zippys locations. And this is a quote from one of our managers in an email string that pretty much was generated right after 6 p.m. I had a mysterious call today, a guy asking to get money back from his payment yesterday because he was overcharged. The weird part was he wanted to email me the check and was asking for my email address. He was really persistent on emailing me. Another thing weird was he had a foreign accent and it was very loud in the background. Caller ID showed Kapolei with the 808 number. So it really gives you an idea that what goes on behind the social engineering aspect that is occurring today. No longer do you have the days of a static email with someone hoping that someone clicks on that malware. It's being backed by individuals, a human person, really promoting or encouraging someone to hit the malware. The other thing I wanted to give some insight onto is the sophisticated tools that Fin7 is using. So in our case, our antivirus software stopped the malware. There was an alert right at 6 a.m., hey, malware detected, malware stopped. Now what happened, we learned later through the forensic investigation, is that there was what they call a zero-day attack. And what this is that although the antivirus stopped the malware communicated back to the cyber criminals to let them know that, hey, I've been stopped, help me. And that's where the cyber criminals have the ability to reconfigure the malware to get through the antivirus that has now been identified. So just an amazing technique. Additional techniques are creation of encrypted files on our system, the extraction of the data, and the deletion of the files. So in fact, when the forensic investigation began, there was very little evidence, and that's why it took 18 days for the forensic investigators to start to unravel and figure out what went on. So we're going to talk more about this during the panel, but there are just a few things I wanted to highlight that we did and I think is a best practice. So segmentation of IT systems. So in our case, you had the perpetrator going from our email server to our point of sale system. It could be any two systems within your organization, but the point is that the cyber criminals have an ability to scan and assess your system and figure out where they need to go to execute, whether it's ransomware or card data breaches. Monitoring software is something we've heavily invested in. It now gives us an ability to scan our network and to really detect if anything unusual is going on. And finally, I think we'll talk more about this, training. Training has been so critical for us in upping our game and being able to ensure that we avoid another occurrence. So I went a little over, I apologize for that, but I want to thank you for your attention. I think we're going to, thank you.